everyone to Prop House Profiles. This is a segment here on the Noun Square where we talk to prop house builders who've had successful props in the past and ask them about their experience with Prop House, as well as to get into the nitty-gritty of what it is that they are building. Today we are joined by Metamonk and Soondooboop, known around the Nouniverse as the Rat Pack, for their matching rat nounish PFPs. So welcome to the Rat Pack. How are you guys today?
Good, Toady.
Good.
How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining me, and excited to talk to you guys about your prop house experience and about Noundation, the project that you guys have been working on since winning Prop House. What's the Rat Pack and what are you guys up to?
Yeah, well, the Rat Pack was just like a moniker that we came up with. It was just kind of like an inside joke type of thing. It was just kind of like a term we used for trolling each other, or if we're just it was just like an endearing term that we kind of used to call each other. And it's more of an endearing term than you otherwise would normally expect it to be.
That's cool. It's funny because a lot of people met you guys in the Nouniverse over the past year, separately or together. And I don't think a lot of people knew that you were actually in real life brothers. And it's kind of like, you know how they say nobody knows you're a cat on the internet? Well, nobody knows you're brothers, I guess, on the internet either.
Right. Yeah. And it's like we weren't necessarily like secretive about, although we have like very similar interests, we're very different people, and we still have kind of a different approach to different things and how we explain things or how we view the world. I guess that's what makes us a good team though. And we kind of complement each other in that regard.
Once you fall down the nouns rabbit hole, it kind of sucks up all your time and you just start building and making friends. So tell me, how did that happen for you? How did you guys end up getting sucked into the Nouniverse?
Our friend introduced us actually to Nouns, that he was kind of paying attention to it. He just thought it was an interesting way to allocate capital and just a different way, right?
Yeah.
It was unlike anything that existed at the time, which, I mean, I'm talking about it as if it was like so long ago, but it wasn't actually that long ago. It's quite interesting how time flies. We just kind of love the spirit of Nouns and of CCO. And the permissionless aspect of things. And so we wanted to contribute in a way that was just reducing friction between different things.
Yeah. So let's switch over and talk a little bit about Prop House. How did you first hear about Prop House? And what were your first thoughts?
Yeah, so I don't know exactly where we first heard it. It had to have been Seneca mentioning it within the Nouns Discord, I believe. But I would say it was an interesting idea. We just love the idea of a more permissionless, low barrier of entry kind of way to tap into, I guess, not necessarily the Nouns treasury per se, because I don't actually think it's about the financial monetary gain or funding that you would have access to, but it was more about the structuring the ideas, right? The flow of ideas and the pipeline of ideas that exist within a community. So we thought that was an interesting way to kind of unlock that value within any community.
That's interesting. So can you expand on that a little bit? So you don't think that the ETH itself is the main benefit of Prop House. So then what is?
No, I don't think the ETH value itself was, because we were going to put up our prop regardless of how much ETH was put up. And it was more about validating responses from the community if there was interest in our idea in the first place. And so I think what Prop House really did well was increase the velocity of ideas bubbling up from the community itself. It's similar to how incubators work as far as increasing the velocity of projects that are coming through the pipeline and really creating an environment in which the quality of the ideas would prove itself in perhaps a smaller way so that it can scale, or you could kind of structure it in a way in which you can build increasing organization around it, starting it in a smaller way and to grow into something bigger.
So kind of like a temp check mechanism mixed with an incubator, if I'm understanding correctly?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the funding aspect of it is definitely a draw for many people, but also just the fact that you can at least kickstart an idea is, I think, a big psychological unlock for people, because once you're putting it out there and people are interacting with it, it becomes a little bit more real of an idea. So we thought that was an interesting way to accelerate the growth of different ideas. And so I think there's many ideas out there, I bet, that would never have come to the surface had it not been for Prop House.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. So what was your original idea? You and Soondooboop worked together on a prop in the very first round of Prop House, which must have been back in February. And what was that for?
Yeah, so our first and only prop was actually one for a nouns design system, which we dubbed the Noundation.
So didn't you guys have a prop for the nouns icon separately in the first round before that?
Yes.
I wanted to touch on that because I think it's interesting how the idea grew from that first round, and I wanted to see if you could give some perspective on how your idea was able to evolve through the process of applying through, I think it was 3 separate rounds, right, before you were funded?
Yeah, exactly. We were only able to get funding on the third round. So although we garnered some interest from the community in both rounds 1 and 2, we didn't quite have enough to place in the top 1 or 2. And so what was interesting was we actually framed the project itself a little bit differently. So in round 1, we simply just said, we're going to create a library of icons.
Right.
Which is an interesting component itself. However, I think it really resonated a bit more once we framed it in the context of a design system as just one component of a design system, a whole design system that was able to help accelerate the process of designing and development for other projects out there in the Nouniverse or anyone that's creating a new project from scratch.
So this kind of harkens back to what you said earlier about how Prop House can be an iterative way to grow your own idea as if you're in an incubator until it's in its final state where it's presumably mature enough to be funded.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, it helps that you actually technically don't need to know anyone from the Nouns community or have any connections within it in order to submit a proposal. And so if you're able to articulate your value proposition for your project, I think it's a really good conversation starter that you can have that can lead to different connections and getting to know other people within the community itself.
What is the Noundation? What is a nouns design system for someone that has no idea what we're saying?
So a design system is essentially, it could be a spectrum of things. Sometimes they're visual, sometimes they're language oriented. Things like color, or you can have anything from icons to full-blown components that are pieces of an interface that you would build or express your brand or an idea. So we started out creating something that we thought would be a good kickstart that process of putting together a design system over time by tapping into the designs of existing projects out there. And we would simply collate the different ways that people create buttons or different layouts and in different designs that people have within their projects, and then look for similarities between them to organize and put together a consistent look and feel along with more technical values for each of those components over time, right?
And for those unfamiliar with the design space, these are fairly common within brands and organizations, correct? To keep some level of cohesion in their design and branding?
That's correct. And not only are brands communicated through messaging, but that gut feeling you have towards a specific idea or brand or individual can also be fostered and facilitated through visuals as well. And so that's kind of what the aim of a design system is to do.
Cool. One of my favorite things about the Noundation, obviously a lot of it is designer focused or facing so that people that are building will have a great use for those easy to pick out themes and icons and tools essentially that they can use to build their individual Nounish projects. But you also had a page on Noundation where anybody could just go and easily copy and paste the noggles, the Unicode noggles and the many different variations that people have made up. Soondooboop, can you tell me a little bit about the impetus for that page and people's response to it?
Yeah, actually, that's the funniest thing about it is that when we were building Noundation, that page was just kind of like an addition. Like it wasn't even included in our original scope of things, and we just kind of threw it up. And looking at the analytics of the site, that's actually the #1 page that's visited. Funny enough, right? It's like how people are using it is very different than how you might assume. So it kind of just grew from that, and we've been taking requests, adding things. Thanks, Toady, for adding a couple of your own noggles as well.
I think I might have the most noggle variations on there.
I think so. So yeah, ever since that came out, I think it's been a great tool of proliferation just on Twitter and otherwise with socials. the whole point of Noundation is to make it easy to import nounish elements into your visuals, into your visual design or your visual projects. And so I think that that's a nice end to the site.
Yeah, I think that's an extension of the design system, because a design system isn't necessarily just a library of components. It's also a way to communicate visually.
Well, a big part of design is creating content, and like it or not, a big percentage of content these days is happening on social media. So obviously these articles have become quite commonly used on Twitter and elsewhere for people to use in their bios and in their tweets and whatnot. So that's something that they can just pull out of Noundation and use on the daily basis.
Yeah, it's an interesting spectrum that you have, because there's components of the Nouns design system that developers can use, but also anyone that needs something visually oriented can also use the Noundation in that regard.
Is that why Soondooboop chose the bar graph, so you could show the full spectrum?
Yes, precisely.
So what's next for the Rat Pack? Obviously, you're still hard at work on Noundation. What's next for Noundation, and do you have any other irons in the fire with Nouns?
We are looking at, from a holistic standpoint, of how we can create our own components that we think would reflect the Nounish ethos and aesthetic, and then putting it out there for people to respond to, I think would be the next step for us. And then on top of that, we have been entertaining a couple other projects that we have kind of on the back burner. Something that Soondooboop was pretty passionate about was something that we're calling Nounhood. That's a novel project that perhaps he can go more into.
Nobody gets the alpha like Toady. But yeah, it's more of like a fun project. Nounhood, essentially, the idea behind it is to create a CCO nounish project around fantasy characters.
Okay.
The goal of this is, one, create characters that people can use in D&D, for example, right? Like they can pick up as many like Nounhood heroes as they want, use them for whatever they want. I think like the other part of that is forking Prop House to create a mechanic where you take the proceeds from the sale of the heroes and then use that to fund the proliferation of the lore, meaning that people can be the ones to get funded to write the actual backstory, to develop some of these characters. So that's kind of like the working idea.
Another Prop House proposal coming in the future, perhaps?
Yeah,
perhaps.
That'd be a very meta proposal, because it involved forking Prop House itself.
Hey man, we heard you like Prop House, so we did a Prop House.
Yes, exactly. So,
one of the interesting things about D&D, if a lot of people don't know, is that a lot of video game lore is based on D&D. So, things like Warcraft borrowed very heavily from D&D. And then you get things like Warcraft, and then from that you get Hearthstone or something built on top of that platform that takes it another further arm's length away with new lore. So it's kind of like layers of lore that can be built on top of this foundation. So it'd be kind of cool to see that happen with Nounish characters. Wait, I can take it even further. D&D inspired Warcraft, and then Warcraft inspired Ethereum. So, right? Because Vitalik said that Warcraft was inspiration for his creating Ethereum. Yeah. So really, without D&D, there's no Ethereum, there's no Nouns.
Oh wow!
It's just coming full circle.
Why do you like building within the Nouns ecosystem?
Oh man! Well, first of all, I don't think any other kind of environment unlocks as much creativity as Nouns does, simply because I think a lot of the conventional barriers that you would have, whether it's finding a team, getting a number of ideas, or having experts to talk to and interface with, I think Nouns is the perfect kind of ecosystem to do so and express yourself in a creative way.
What would be your advice for people who are thinking of putting a prop into Prop House? You've obviously been through the entire process. You're building as a result of it. What would be your best advice?
I would say just be good at answering who, what, where, when, how, and basically all those things. If you can identify and articulate those tenets for the reason behind your prop, I think anyone can take a look at it. They can get a sense of what you're offering to do for the community. Being able to communicate that efficiently and succinctly, I think will go a long way.
Absolutely. Communication is key. I want to thank you both for taking the time to chat with us today. Always nice to hear where people are after winning a Prop House round, where the project is at the moment. So it was great to hear about Noundation and what you've been working on.
Absolutely. We aren't going anywhere. So yeah, looking forward to our next conversation.